Okay, so let's switch gears here with some potential drama developing at Palace. Palace are set to learn their European fate at the end of the month. End of the month? I mean, end of the month?
No. Won't take so long.
Yeah. I'm you,
Should know now.
Of course they should. But legal challenges could drag the saga out even further. That's good to know. The actual Jim White and Simon Jordan, the real one, this is, discussed the situation yesterday. Simon was concerned about the potential of losing Oliver Glasner, who has been, I must admit, different class.
What's at risk here is a participation in Europe for the first time in the club's history in a major competition. I think also the potential future of their manager is at risk here, because ultimately not being able to play in Europe with a manager that wanted backing last year, didn't get it, got on with it, produced a team that was quite formidable last year and wins a cup competition and then gets excluded, I think could be an existential risk for the manager staying at the club. So there's a lot to play for here.
Well, that wouldn't be good. They're going to bring in a huge Palace fan, Dan Cook from the HLTCO podcast. Dan, a very good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Dan.
Hi, how you doing?
We're doing well, Dan. Well, we're doing well, but this news obviously will concern you. And listening to Simon there, I mean, that would put the fear into any Palace fan, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the prospect of losing Oliver Glasner is not one that we want to contemplate, really. I don't think we've had any noises to suggest that is the case.
Yeah.
But obviously the lack of certainty over our European position is far from ideal. You know, you win the FA Cup final, you want to have a summer sort of bask in the glory of that. You know, there's no international tournament. And I think because we've now 2 or 3 days after the final realised that there is this sense of worry about it, it certainly has taken the gloss off it to certain extents.
Isn't it a bit strange, though? I know a lot of us maybe didn't know that Crystal Palace owners are joint ownership, but didn't they see that as a problem? Did they not feel that maybe Crystal Palace were going to win a major trophy or get into the top 7? Because if this does happen and Crystal Palace get kicked out of Europe, I mean, the upsetting the players, the fans, the manager.
You've got to look at the situation in reality. So the only way that we could have avoided this truly is to put the shares that John Textor owns in the football club into blind trust by the 1st of March. John Textor is actively trying to sell his stake in the football club because he has no power behind the scenes. He has 25% voting rights, but Steve Parish is the man who calls the shots. And with that in mind, John Textor has always felt as though he's running into a figurative brick wall. In order to sell the shares, they can't be in blind trust. And the deadline of the 1st of March was when Crystal Palace were taking on Millwall in the FA Cup round of 16. We obviously beat them. We went on to beat Fulham in the quarterfinals, Villa in the semis, and then Manchester City in the final. I don't think anyone in their right mind would have potentially put a sale of his shares in the club in jeopardy because we might have got through all of those games. Last year, I believe, the deadline for putting shares in blind trust was the 1st of July, which obviously comes after a season that's finished. So if you're sort of forcing owners to hedge their bets as to what competitions we might be in, or not sell their shares in a football club when they don't feel they have any power, I think it's sort of a rock and a hard place situation for John Textor, really.
I've got to say, Dan, I don't, I just think it'd be devastating. I really do. It'd be so, I'm saying unfair, but if the rules are the rules, but I just think for the Palace fans, for the way they performed in that cup, it'd be such a absolute disaster. It really would. Now, another one to this one. Forest have written to UEFA to voice their concern and say the Eagles could be in breach of multi-club ownership rules. We're going to get more on this. We're going to bring in talkSPORT reporter and Forest fan Max Scott. Max, good morning Max. To you. Where do you stand on this, Max?
Look, I ultimately think Palace have earned the right to play in the Europa League. What they achieved against City was unbelievable, and I happen to think that it's absolutely ridiculous that UEFA allow multi-club ownership but not to the point where teams can play in the same tournament. I think it's ultimately a massive contradiction, right? Having said that, just because I or many Palace fans or pundits don't like the rules doesn't change the fact that Palace might have broken them. And in the same way, I don't like PSR. I think PSR punishes the ambition of clubs like Forest, clubs like Palace, clubs that are trying to break through into the top 6. But ultimately, I've come on this very shows across talkSPORT, and was critical of Marinakis that he broke those rules, right? Despite the fact he's sort of since bankrolled us to Europe and we've had an incredible season. So I think ultimately that there does need to be a little bit of introspection from Palace fans, because there has been an oversight from the hierarchy. They didn't as was described, put their shares into a blind trust. And, I understand, you can't sell those shares if they're in a blind trust. But if you're on the precipice of achieving history, which Palace were, and they've broken the rules, then ultimately they can't be in Europe. And I think that would be incredibly sad. And I hope for their sake and for football's sake that that's not the case. But ultimately, if they've broken the rules, then if that day comes, they shouldn't be surprised that they're not allowed in the tournament. I think it would be a sad day for them. But, just because we don't like the rules doesn't change anything.
No, I think you make a fair point. I think every football fan would want to see Palace in that tournament next year because they've deserved it, players have deserved it, clubs deserved it, I think the fans deserve it. Here's an interesting one. Just go back to what you said there, Max, involving PSR. Do you think it does hold back clubs like Palace or Forest, or the flip side of that would be you think it prevents the richer getting better and stronger and running away, whether it was Newcastle, whether it was Villa, whether it was Manchester City, Liverpool? I mean, does it not stop them doing that more than it prevents the other clubs catching them?
I think it's a double-edged sword, Ali. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily land either side of that. But you look at Aston Villa are flying really close to the wind this summer in terms of PSR. Might well have to sell some of their top players. So we've got two conversations here. We've got one conversation about the rules that govern football, PSR being one of them, these UEFA multi-club ownership rules being another, which ultimately I don't think allow the game to flourish. And they put Forest in a position where they were docked 4 points for holding out on more money for their best player at the time, that was Brennan Johnson. They did hold out. That money's then been used to reinvest in the club, and we've then got Conference League this season. Had the best season in over a generation. Same with the rules for Palace. I think it'd be incredibly sad if they're not allowed after what they've achieved to play in the Europa League. But it doesn't change the fact that they're the rules, and the people at the top, just like I was incredibly critical of Marinakis, I think that rather than, and I'm not accusing the Palace fan on here today of doing this, but you've seen online some wild conspiracies about the letter that's been written by Forest. Nobody has seen the contents of that letter, and so it would only be speculation to say what is in there. So
that's fair.
I don't want to have that conversation. What I think Palace fans should be doing is say, hold on a minute, before we've got to that final, playing against Pep Guardiola. I mean, it was an amazing achievement, but they haven't been vintage this season. We should have done something to prepare ourselves, or to not prevent us from.
All right.
I'll finish what I'm saying.
Okay.
We should have done something to prevent ourselves from not being allowed to get into Europe. So I think there's a little bit of introspection needed.
And you come down.
Well, I mean, the deadline was the 1st of March, mate. Like, the 1st of March was when we were playing Millwall.
Then do it before the 1st of March.
But it's still after the deadline, mate. It doesn't really matter, does it? Because the deadline apparently is the deadline. So if you do it in April, what does it matter?
Well, do it before the deadline.
We had no concept that we were going to get beyond the round of 16 in a competition we've never won before. It makes no sense.
Yeah, look, it's difficult. It makes it really difficult for Palace. I totally get that. I'm acknowledging that the rules I don't think are good enough, but equally, you didn't, and now you're in this position. And so I think there needs to be, and I don't know if you have, but I think there needs to be slightly less criticism of a letter that no one knows the contents of, and slightly more, well, how have we got into this position? It's that the rules aren't good enough and they're making your club suffer, and I don't agree with that. I think you should be playing Europa League, but ultimately, Parish, Textor haven't done what they should have done.
talkSPORT Breakfast, waking you up Monday to Friday morning from 6 a.m. on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.